It's time. Well, I don't hear it,
authors,
but I just started.
Filmmakers, entertainment, and all your listening needs. Listen now to Talk Now Radio, where no topic is taboo.
Hello, everyone. Welcome to Talk Now Radio. This is your host, Royce the Redneck Radio Man. And joining me today is going to be Jim Harold. And we're going to be talking about his newest book, Campfire Stories 2, I believe is the name of it. And if I'm getting that wrong, well, matter of fact, let me scroll down and make sure I'm not. True Stories, but Jim Harold's Campfire 2. Folks, this book is already, before it's even out in print, out on Kindle edition, #1 top best-selling. This book is going like hotcakes. I'm sure you guys are going to want to get you a copy and read it. It's fantastic, especially if you got your lights out around with the family, the wife, the kids. Be a great form of entertainment. Campouts, just to sit around and talk about paranormal and the ghosts. He got these stories straight from people as they experienced them, and he's sharing them with everybody else. So let's bring Jim in here, and I'm sure he can do a lot better job of talking about this than I'm doing. Jim, how are you doing today?
I'm doing good, Royce. Thanks so much for having me on the show again. I really appreciate it, and so glad to spend some time with you and your audience.
Well, I was really thrilled when you looked me up and asked to be on my show again, because it seemed like it had been such a long time since your last True Stories book had come out and that we had talked that time that I was wondering whether it was going to be time to do it again.
Well, it had been 2 years, and I decided to do another book, and lo and behold, True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold Campfire 2 has done really well. It's, as you said, it's currently the #1 bestseller in the supernatural category on the Kindle in the U.S. store, and it's available now for $2.99. And people are really enjoying it, and it's a great book for this time of the year because everybody's into spooky stories around the Halloween time, and that's what we serve up with the book.
Exactly. In fact, that's why I themed my whole entire month of October around ghosts, witches, ghouls, goblins, whatever I could think of, and whoever I could get that was into those particular topics. Because, hey, it is the season. What can I say?
Yeah, exactly.
Well, Jim, did your first book, True Stories, do as well as this book is doing so far?
Well, I think it's been a growth pattern. The first book was very respectable, but this book has taken off. And obviously the second time you do something, you hope that you build on the first one and do a little bit better. This has done a lot better. And we just actually started. The Kindle book's only been out about 2 weeks. And waiting on the Amazon folks to get that print book up. But the nice thing about Kindle is, and people don't realize this, is you don't need a Kindle to read a Kindle book. They've got a ton of free apps over at Amazon for if you have an iPhone or a Droid phone, if you have any kind of tablet for your computer, whether it's PC or Mac. So basically, if you can listen to a show like this, you can read a Kindle book.
Okay. Now, I'm glad you covered that there particularly. I'm glad you covered the part about the supernatural category, too. But it's always good to know that you don't have to actually have a Kindle, because a lot of people would say we can't afford a Kindle, and they take care of that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's the nice thing. It's accessible. If you have a computer, you can read a Kindle book. If you have a smartphone, and more people these days have, like either an Android or maybe an iPhone, if you have any of those things or any kind of tablet, you can pretty much read a Kindle book.
Yeah, I heard that a lot of technology is trying to kind of incorporate Kindle nowadays. It's getting to be such a, popular item that everybody wants it. And I think a lot of it has to do with the fact that you can buy books through it so inexpensive. I mean, $2-3 a pop, whereas paperbacks, a cheap one would cost you $6.99.
Right. Well, I'll give you an example. In my situation, my book now, because I'm publishing this one myself, even though we had a professional cover made and professional formatters and all of that. So it's a pro book, but I put it up through my own company, and I was able to control the pricing, so I'm able to make it available to people for $2.99, and I think it comes out at 252 pages, so it's a full-size book. for $2.99, you can't go wrong. And if somebody does want the print version, just because it costs more, once that's out, that'll be $9.99. But essentially, if you buy the Kindle book, you get the same exact content for quite a saving. So it's very attractive for people, and it's nice because, you know, if it's a dark night or something and there's nothing on the television, nothing to listen to, and you want to read, you can just pick up your Kindle or your Kindle app or your computer or whatever, quickly download an inexpensive book, and you've got your entertainment for the evening. So it's just very convenient for folks.
It sounds like it is. Got to ask you, though, just how scary are some of these stories in it?
Well, there's a range. You know, there's some that are actually heartwarming and touching, and then there are some that are really scary. And if you want me to, I can share one of those with you.
Actually, I was going to ask.
See, I'm psychic. Well, the one that I'd like to tell you about first, and this one really got me, is about a painting. And it's a story, this is a man, an adult man, who told me the story of his childhood. And he lived with his mom and his sister, and then his mom's friend and her child. His mom was divorced. And they lived in this 2-story apartment together. And anyway, his mom went checking out the garage sales one day, and this was in San Francisco, and she finds this beautiful painting. It wasn't a print, it was the actual original painting, and it's of this woman sitting in a chair. Beautiful woman sitting in a chair. So anyway, they bring it home, and the weirdness ensues. First thing that they notice is that the painting, for no reason at all, starts falling off the wall. For no reason. They check to make sure the nail is in good, it falls off the wall. Inopportune times, it falls off the wall. And then they start noticing at night when they go to bed, they slept on the second level, they noticed that downstairs in the living room, it sounded like that there would be weeping. And that the weeping, every time this would happen over the course of a couple months, would get a little more intense, and a little more intense, and then a lot more intense, and then really intense. To the one evening that comes into question for this story. And what happened was, there's this crying, they're all in bed, and it's intense, bawling, very, very sad. So anyway, the moms decide, you know, we've got to get out of here because this is truly frightening, truly frightening. So they gather up the kids, don't even take time to get them into the street clothes, they're still in their pajamas. They take them downstairs. Now, they don't go past the living room, so they don't see what's going on, but this weeping and crying, intense crying, is still going on. And it's the crying of a woman. They go out to their car to the parking lot, and they have a patio door, and they don't have any window treatments on it, no blinds or anything like that, so you can see into the house. And they look in the house, and in the living room, there is a chair, much like the one in the painting. And sitting in that chair is the woman from the painting, crying intensely. Needless to say, Royce, they never went back to that house again.
I'm not too sure I would have wanted to go back to that house again. So you think this woman was just coming back, lamenting her death or the death of a loved one, but wasn't really necessarily trying to scare everybody out? It just worked out that way?
Well, it didn't. One thing that I did not include in the story, it was interesting. He said that this home that they went to, they thought that maybe the people who had the house were into some kind of pretty dark stuff in terms of spiritual stuff. Not Satanism, but something kind of on the darker side. And there were some kind of weird murals on the ceiling and things. So maybe it was some kind of energy that I picked up from that home. I'm not exactly sure. But I'll say this. Weird things happen, and people come on these shows, and the thing that I love, and these shows are compiled, these books are compiled from my show, Jim Harold's Campfire. The thing that I love about doing the shows, these are not necessarily ghost hunters or people who are going out and seeking it. Certainly this man was not seeking it when he was a little boy. These are stories, and the stories in the book are people who are going about their daily business, everyday, ordinary business, when something extraordinary meets them. And that's what I enjoy about it.
Yeah, the unexplained and the unexpected all wrapped up into one. Now, before we go any further, though, I don't want to forget to mention you can learn more about Jim, his show, his books, and everything at www.jimharold.com. and I'm pasting that into the chat room now, so y'all can just copy and paste it into your browser. I do apologize, folks, but it ain't clickable in this particular chat room, and I'm using a chat script that come with the website script, so I kind of got to go with what they give me until I find a better script. Also, for those that want to call in and ask questions, pardon me, the number is 832-632-7904. He'll be here to answer questions for at least about roughly the next hours if y'all are interested. If you're listening elsewhere, feel free to catch the show at www.talknowradio.com. Would love to have you as a member. And if Jim don't mind me taking a moment away from his show to mention everybody else, toward the end of this month, I plan on having a contest. We're going to have people call in, give ghost stories, and give a title for it. I'm going to run a poll for, it's going to have to be members only for the voting because that's the way the site's designed. You don't have to be a member to tell a story, or to compete, but you have to be one to vote. The winners will get a Talk Now Radio cap, or a Talk Now Radio coffee mug, or a Talk Now Radio T-shirt. And I had to stop and think about that one. Depending on which place you win in the contest, I've just about got all the details worked out, and I should be posting information about that over the next couple of days. So I just thought I'd bring it up here. And Jim, I'm sorry to take away from your show for that one, but I'd forget if I didn't.
No, I understand totally. Having shows of my own, I know you've got to get those key opportunities in there to tell people about what's coming up, so perfectly understandable.
So, now, you was telling me earlier before the show started that the paperback's due to come out in the next few days?
Yes, basically what I've done is again, I published it through my company, and it's all going through Amazon and CreateSpace for the paperback. And they have all the files they need. They just have to flip a switch and make it live. So it literally could be live before the end of the show, or it might be a few days, but relatively shortly we should have that book up there, and you can purchase it I'll give them a URL. It's easy for the Amazon books, and it'll take them right to the page where the Kindle book is and the paperback will be. It's JimHaroldBooks.com, JimHaroldBooks.com, JimHaroldBooks.com. That'll take them right to the books if they want to find the books very easily. My regular site is JimHarold.com, where they can find all of my podcasts and so forth.
Okay. Definitely do appreciate that. Now, you've had other books, but these are the only two books you got out so far as the Campfire Story books?
Yeah, at this point, those are the two books, because I'm primarily a podcaster, and these are derived from our show. So the thought here is that I wanted to share these stories because a lot of people don't listen to podcasts. As much as we love the technology, there's a lot of people who are maybe not familiar with it. But a book, everybody can understand. And there were so many great stories that I wanted to make sure that I shared them with a wider audience, and that's why. Now, in terms of other books in the future, I'm sure there's going to be, after the success of this one, there are going to be more campfire books. But I also have plans on writing some other books, still formulating some ideas, but I'm really enjoying this other side of my career, so you can look for more Jim Harold books, but hopefully your audience will pick up on this one. I think this is a good starting place, even though we did another one previously. This is my favorite of the books, and it's standalone. You don't have to have read the first one, so I kind of recommend this as a good starting place.
Okay, that sounds pretty good to me. Now, also, I know that a lot of people that listen to my show, whether it be live or whether it be in a podcast or YouTube or wherever, that you guys are radio hosts yourself. Thought I'd let you guys know Jim is always looking to come on somebody's show. You can hear him here live now. You can tell he's a great guest. He'd like to come talk about his book, and quite sure he might even talk about some other stuff if y'all bring it up and mention it to him, tell him what to expect. You can get a hold of me, and I can help get you in touch with him. You can find him on Facebook and leave him a message. In fact, Jim, you got an email out there too, right?
Sure. People can contact me directly at jim@jimharold.com. That's JIM@JIMHAROLD.com. And I'd be glad to be on different shows if anybody has a show out there that they'd like to share with it, because there's a big internet out there, so we want to make sure that everybody gets the message about True Ghost Stories, Jim Harold's Campfire too.
Yeah, and I got to tell you, Jim, 7 years ago when I first started doing these shows, is right when Blog Talk Radio first came out, and back then there was maybe a handful of radio hosts, especially in the paranormal genre.
Right.
Here it is 5, 6, 7 years later, and both on Blog Talk and outside of Blog Talk, on personal websites, their own personal blogs, these shows they're just, exponentially blown out everywhere.
Yeah, I know. I started in 2005 with the Paranormal Podcast, which continues to this day. I think we released the 305th edition of that one today. And in 2008, I remember when I was setting up my podcast, and hardly anybody knew what a podcast was at the time. I looked and I saw there were 19 other people podcasting on the paranormal, and I said, oh my goodness, how am I ever going to stand out? And now, instead of 20 people podcasting on it, it's probably more like 20,000. But, I think that's a good thing. I love the idea that someone, if they have the interest and the work ethic and the talent, can open up a mic, whether it's about the paranormal or it's about knitting or it's about politics or music or whatever it is. They can open up a mic and share their passion with the world and build a community of like-minded people. And you mentioned Facebook and Twitter, and I think that's been a huge change since we started, both of us. Those things really didn't exist at that time, and now they're a big part of everything we do, and a lot of the way how we communicate with people. So there have been a lot of changes. It's been a lot of fun, and I just see it getting bigger and bigger.
Yeah, I got to tell you, it seems to me like Facebook and Twitter and that have done a world of good to bring authors and their public closer together. You can see folks like you, Marie Jones, Nick Redfern, Larry Flaxman on Facebook posting messages. They're on Twitter tweeting. The average guy that buys their books are tweeting back or posting back or commenting, and it's just kind of closed the gap.
Yeah, I think so. We used to be in an era where people broadcast. It was a one-way communication, right? It was where I say something and all of you listen. Well, certainly we broadcast now, but it's a two-way communication, and many hosts, including myself, as much as possible, want to make that a two-way communication. So if somebody sends me an email or messages me, I try to acknowledge it or get back to them. Or a lot of times people send me guest requests for the shows, and I'll end up saying, yeah, that's a good request. I'll book that person. So we really try to make it a two-way communication as much as possible. Being one person, it's hard to return each and every email and each and every message, but I do the best I can. And it's really made a lot more fun because you kind of get friends. I know some of my listeners, I'll say, oh, it's so-and-so from thus and such. How you doing? And how did thus and such go? So it's really a lot of fun. Now, there's still some people still in the old model. They're not interested in the communication back, but I certainly am, and I enjoy it.
Well, you've got two different podcasts going on. Am I correct, or did I misunderstand?
Actually, I've got more than that, but
wow.
The two free, actually, I think I have currently, about 8 or 9 podcast series, something, no, wait, 5, 6, 8 different podcast series going currently, but 2 of them are free, and those are the ones you can get at jimharold.com. The Paranormal Podcast, where I interview authors and experts about the paranormal. For example, today we released a show with Rosemary Ellen Guiley, a great author who's actually...
she is. She's a great guest. She's been on my show. Oh,
she's fantastic. And we did a show on dreams and the afterlife. And so that's what I do on that show. And then the second show that I started, Paranormal Podcast dates from 2005. The second show I started was Campfire in 2009. And even though the listenership is technically smaller, I get a lot more response out of that show because I think it speaks to people. And it's just ordinary, normal people who come on and say, hey, Jim, this happened to me. And the people may be from the States, they might be from Canada, They could be from as far away as South Africa, Japan, Australia, the UK. So we get an international flavor and some really, really great stories, which I really enjoy. And then we have a series of Plus podcasts. If somebody really gets into the content, I have a whole series of podcasts at jimharold.net that people can subscribe to and become a Plus member, plus some paranormal courses that we do and so forth. And I should say I also have a free newsletter over at jimharold.com that you can sign up for. That comes out every week, and that has paranormal stories of note and also updates on my books and on my shows. So really the starting place, if you're interested in my shows, is jimharold.com. There you can get 90 days of the shows for free on the Paranormal Podcast and Campfire. So that's a great way to go to see, if I like this guy, knows though that 90-day stream is always free. You can always delve in for more at jimharold.net. And then if you want to connect to the books, the easiest way to do that is to go over to jimharoldbooks.com.
Okay. And I got to ask you this, because I thought I was busy just being a one-man show over here myself, but I've never attempted 8 different shows by myself. How do you do that and write a book too?
Well, this is my full-time job. And that wasn't the case when I did the first book, but in the last 2 years I've gone full-time, and I've really enjoyed that, and I think that that's why I think the second book is stronger. And I work 8-10 hours a day, and I typically work at least some every day. This is a job, but it's a job I love, and I love sharing this information and these experiences with people. So I take it very seriously, just as someone who goes into an office every day and works for somebody else. I'd like to say I have one of my boss is a jerk. He never gives me a break. And the boss is me.
You just had a friendly chat with yourself.
That's right. I look myself in the mirror and you've got to buck up and get this stuff done. But the thing is that I love it because I get to talk to such interesting people, and I'm sure you feel the same way, Royce, when you talk to people like Rosemary. I mean, I've got Brad Steiger coming up on the show, who is fantastic, a legend in the field. And people like that, Marie D. Jones, you mentioned, Nick Redfern, we've talked to him many times, Jeff Belanger, Michelle Belanger. We just talked to William Carey not that long ago about his recent Area 51 or the Real Area 51 book.
Oh yeah.
Yeah, so we get to talk to a lot of these great paranormal authors. And the thing that's kind of striking and kind of blew me away is that we've had the opportunity to talk to some authors who are no longer with us. And I think that it's important to have like that to kind of serve as the historic record. I mean, there are many shows out there. We're not the only one. But we can always say, for example, Philip Coppens, who many of your folks may have seen on Ancient Aliens. Very nice man, and he passed. And we were privileged to talk to him. And recently, Jesse Marcel Jr., the son of Jesse Marcel Sr. from the Roswell incident. We had interviewed him. You never know how long you're going to have these great people, these interesting people. So it's great to get to talk to them while we've got the chance.
Yeah, I got to tell you, I never saw that coming with Philip Coppens. He was so young and... Yeah, absolutely. In fact, I was tuning in Ancient Aliens the other day, and it was a repeat, and I saw him, and it's like, oh my goodness, I can't believe he's gone. Yeah, and as a matter of fact, I just saw on Facebook the other day, Mike Barrow's on there letting everybody know that he's going to be doing quite a bit on the newest Ancient Aliens coming out. Yeah,
and Mike's been on our show as well. He's done, one of the shows I remember was about the dark side of the moon, so he's always an interesting guest. And our paranormal shows kind of focus on a little bit of everything. We do ghosts. Some people think paranormal means just ghosts. But for me, the paranormal means more than that. We have people on about cryptozoology, although some debate whether there's a supernatural piece to that or not. That's under our umbrella. UFOs, certainly. We kind of get a little bit into the conspiracy stuff, but not too much because that's more on our Plus Club. And then, of course, ghosts and afterlife communications and those kind of things. We talk about that as well. So we try to make it a good smorgasbord of paranormal content.
So you cover just about everything, but maybe not all on the same show.
Correct.
Well, that sounds pretty good. I cover everything and do it all from one show, but for me that works out easier. We all got our methods, but
sure.
I got to tell you, Jim, I'm with you on this thing. Since I've been doing this here for 7 years, I've got to meet wonderful people like you and Rosemary Guillory, Marie D. Jones, Nick Redfern, Mike Barr. Well, we went down the list already, but Micah Hanks, but interesting people that are spent who knows how many years researching these subjects that most people never learned anything about, many people have never heard of. You can get in as deep as you want to get into quantum mechanics or spirituality or you name it. You can learn anything you want to know talking to these people.
Yeah, it is interesting. I will say this, though. When I started this, Royce, I don't know if this kind of follows your experience. When I started 8 years ago, I said, gee, the more people, when I started, I said, this will be great. I'll do this for 6 months, 12 months, kind of as a hobby. And boy, I'll talk to all these authors and experts and I'll have this stuff figured out because quite honestly, I didn't just get interested in this 8 years ago. I've been interested since I was a little kid. I say many times on the programs that one of my inspirations was In Search Of. When I was a kid in the 70s, I'm in my 40s now. And so I've always been fascinated by this stuff. So back in 2005, I thought, I'll finally have the answers. Well, the truth is, 8 years in, I have more questions now than I had then. And it's kind of like, Beyond the Looking Glass. It's kind of like Alice in Wonderland. The deeper that you get into it, the more questions you have and the more questions that open up. But I guess that's part of the fun. I don't know if we'll ever get the answers, Royce, but I enjoy asking the questions.
I was about to say, I'm not so sure I want to get all the answers. They say it's the journey that gets you there that has all the fascination. Once you arrive, you get bored.
No, that's a good point. That's a very good point.
But I also got to ask you, Jim, about roughly how many of these stories are inside this second volume?
Well, the subtitle of it is 70 Spooky Stories That Will Keep You Up at Night. So it's 70 stories. That's why I feel so good about it, because I think it's a real value for people, because I picture somebody taking this book, whether it's the Kindle edition or the print edition when it comes out, and taking it around a real campfire and sharing stories, or maybe reading it before you go to your Halloween party. And then you've got all these great stories to share. And most of them can be read in one sitting. And they're just self-contained, concise stories. Most of them are ghost stories. Now, it does say true ghost stories, but there are a few UFO-type stories in there. There are a few cryptozoology-type stories. The lion's share of the stories are ghostly-type encounters. But it's a fun ride for sure.
Well, are there any ghost stories about the ghost of, say, cats or dogs?
In this book, we didn't have any. I believe in the first book, we did have one of those. But I do think that's something, as someone who lost a beloved pet a little over a year ago, I believe that it's possible, and I have had people on the show. It just didn't fall into that particular category, or didn't fall in, because what I do is I take maybe 50 or 60 of these shows. I listen to all the shows, and I pick out the best stories to compile a volume. In this particular 50 or 60 shows I used to compile this book, there weren't any in that category. But that doesn't mean there aren't typically, and that doesn't mean that we wouldn't include them in a future edition, because certainly. Now, I take that back. There is one story about about a dog. And what happened is that this man died, an elderly man. And they were having people over at the house every day, at the family's house, to grieve. And then the funny thing is that as soon as this happened, a day or so later, this dog showed up on the porch. And it was very well behaved, and it didn't bother anybody. And they tried to feed it food. It wouldn't eat, but it kept going on the porch. And this was over the 2 or 3 day period that people were mourning this person who had passed. And it was the day of the funeral, and they were driving to the funeral. And as I recall, I don't have it in front of me, as I recall, on the route, you know how they come with the hearse and all the cars, this dog was sitting on the curb watching the procession, very well behaved. And then all of a sudden, after the funeral, nobody ever sees the dog again. It never comes back to the house. It never is seen again. But it showed up right as a person died, very well behaved, almost acting as a sentry at the porch. And then, several miles away, he's observing